And the meeting is now being recorded and live streamed, so I'll now take the adjournment for this meeting of the Education Resources Committee of the 6th of September 2022. Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Councillor Anderson is here. Just checking to see if Councillor Bradley is here. I don't see anything from Councillor Bradley at the moment. Councillor Clark. Apologies from Councillor Bradley, thank you. Councillor Clark is here. Councillor Cowie is participating remotely. Councillor Fagan, I don't see anything from Councillor Fagan, so okay. Councillor Ferguson is participating remotely. Councillor Frame is here. Councillor Fulton. Councillor Fulton is participating remotely. Councillor Gray. Councillor Gray is also participating remotely. Councillor Hamilton is here, as is Councillor Horsham. Councillor Johnson-Dempsey is participating remotely. Councillor Keat is here, as is Councillor Kerr. Councillor Lambie is also participating. I have apologies from Councillor Lockhart, and I understand that Councillor McCreary is substituting for Councillor Lockhart, and I see that he's participating, so that's absolutely fine. Councillor Logan is here. Councillor Loudon is participating remotely, as is Councillor McCallan. Councillor McGeever is here, as is Councillor Razak. Councillor Scott is also participating, as is Councillor Thompson. Councillor Walker is here, as is Councillor Watson. In terms of external representatives, Councillor Mulligan, John Mulligan is here. Dr Iskander is here. Gillian Coulter, just checking to see if Gillian Coulter is here. Nothing from Gillian Coulter and nothing on screen either. Andy Harvey is participating remotely. Anne-Marie Hobson. No, nothing from Anne-Marie Hobson. I have apologies from Hilary Kirby, and Christine Hall is participating at the meeting also this morning. So unless I've missed anybody out,
it's just to say, Councillor Donnelly, I don't know if you sorted out her, but she's substituting for Councillor Bradley.
We have, I don't see Councillor Donnelly participating remotely at the moment, but I know that she has been sent a password reset for the meeting, so it's just a case of waiting for her to be able to join. Perhaps we could get our colleagues in IT to contact her and see if there are any difficulties. And if she joins the meeting, I'll certainly make a note of that. Thank you very much.
No problems. Thanks, Paul.
With that, Chair, I'll hand back to you for the business of the meeting.
Thanks very much for that, Pauline. Item 1 is declaration of interest. Is there any declarations? No. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the monitoring items, which number 2 is Education Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 2021 to 2022, pages 5 to 10, and I'll invite Louise to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This is the first of 2 reports in the Revenue Budget for Committee this morning, one covering the final outturn position for the resource for 21-22 and the second covering the current financial year 22-23 position up to the 15th of July. So looking at the first report, this provides information on the actual expenditure against budget for the period 1st of April 2021 through to the 31st of March 22 for education resources. It is the final report presented to committee for the financial year and outlines the final outturn position in relation to the budget and also a probable outturn. It also outlines the final costs of COVID for the resource, and this position has been approved as part of the overall financial position for the Council as reported at the Executive Committee earlier in June this year. So Section 4 outlines a position in relation to the Scottish Attainment Challenge and funding for PEF and SAC programmes. The budget for the year was 12.235 million and the spend as at the 31st of March was 9.645 million with 2.590 million still to spend, and this has been carried forward to meet commitments for the remaining school session through to June 22, closing the session 21-22. In relation to SAC, the actual expenditure at the end of the financial year was 1.946 million, and funding was received to this value to cover the spend in the period. Section 6 on page 6 of your report outlines the main financial implications, and the year-end position is a reported overspend of 1.702 million after the approved transfers to reserves. However, removing the cost of COVID leaves a break-even position for education's core budget, and this is in line with what we projected at the probable outturn forecast. The total cost of COVID for the resource is 1.702 million, and this reflects expenditure items of 1.684 million, as outlined in Appendix B. And these cover the areas that we've been trailing across the financial year, including the increased costs of utilities due to the increased ventilation requirements in our schools and establishments, the increased costs of placements for pupils with additional support needs in independent schools. In addition, the resource position, COVID position, also includes the impact for loss of income, which was 78,000 in relation to music tuition, which was the early part of the year, April to June, before the charges were removed, and also an underspend of 60,000 due to expenditure not incurred on breakfast clubs. And again, that was the early part of the financial year, April to June, before all of the clubs were re-established, and that reflects the food cost in terms of the saving there. So this gave us a net cost of COVID of 1.702 million. Section 6.4 outlines the funding received for learning recovery for education, and this was 8.927 million across the year, including logistics funding and funding for the CO2 monitors. And in addition, as you'll know, we had the Council's own investment for education learning recovery of 2.245 million. So this gave us a total learning recovery budget in year of 11.172 million. And this is outlined in Appendix B again. This represents the direct funding that we received in relation to the offsetting our costs of COVID. So there is further specific grants available that have been used to support the staffing costs in April to June, as well as the continuation of the strategic programme, and this funding is all committed and will be part of our 22-23 reporting. The Council's strategic investment supported our supported study programmes and tutoring programmes, digital inclusion, as well as the learning recovery of staffing across the year, and the full spend of 2.245 million approved at committee was delivered and achieved in the financial year. In terms of the core budget for the resource, we are reporting a break-even position, and this reflects an underspend in various specific funding areas which are part of our transfers to reserves programme, and this includes PEF, as I've outlined, at 4.3, as well as early years 1140 expansion programme, reflecting the timing of programme delivery, and other underspends in new programmes for additional teachers and the child disability payment support, which have been carried forward to meet future staff commitments for the school session April to June 22. Our transfers to reserves have been approved at committee in June, and these are outlined in Appendix A of the report. In relation to the core budget areas, there was a break-even position for the year after the cost of COVID is removed, and this effect reflects the net effect of underspends in early years core budget, partially offset by overspend relating to transport costs, both for our mainstream transport delivery and also ASN transport, as well as our school placements, which, as you know, are demand-led. We have our standard budget variants, and these reflect changes to education's budget from the period where we last reported to committee, covering 31st of December through to the 31st of March. And they mainly covered year-end accounting entries reflecting transfers to and from reserves, capital and budget variants, all part of our year-end accounting. Transfers of budget across resources, budget to reflect how we deliver our service activity, and also within our schools in relation to how we reflect our education maintenance allowance and our school environments as part of the devolved management scheme. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations. The education's outturn position as at the 31st of March 22 of an overspend of 1.702 million after the approved transfers of reserve be noted, and that this is COVID related and is funded corporately as part of the overall council COVID position, and that proposed budget variants be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Louise. Is there any questions on that item? No, I don't see any. So I'll ask the committee to agree the report.
Agreed.
Agreed. I'll go on to number 3, which is Education Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 2022 to 2023, which is pages 11 to 14, and it's Louise again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So again, second report for the committee today, and this gives us the most up-to-date information in relation to the new revenue budget across 22-23 financial year, and covers the period 1st of April through to the 15th of July, which is period 4 of our reporting. So first report to committee for this year, and it is an early report, obviously, for committee. It doesn't reflect our new session from August just quite yet. So paragraph 4 on page 11 contains updated information in relation to our Scottish Attainment Challenge funding for the new financial year. So for PEF, we have a revised new budget of 11.540 million, and this represents the 2.590 million that was carried forward from last financial year that's been approved, as mentioned in the previous report, and also a new allocation for 22-23 of 8.950 million. Spend and commitment to date as at the 15th of July is 3.672 million, with 7.868 million still to spend. And this includes all the staffing through from April to August, but doesn't yet recognise the staffing for PEF for the new session from August, and this will be picked up in future reports. In relation to the Strategic Equity Fund, which is obviously the new fund that replaces the SAC programme this year, the budget for the year is 1.473 million, and spend and commitment to date is 1,010,000, with 463,000 still to spend. And this does include all the staff that we know about and are in post already for the session through to the 31st of March, and also other commitments reflected within this position. So turning to the main financial implications of the report, paragraph 6.1 on page 12 outlines the current position with a reported break-even position against the phased budget. There is no separate reporting for COVID as we move into the new financial year, as additional funding received to support ongoing pressures have been incorporated into the new year budget, and this for education includes transport as well as COVID independent school places, and also in addition we have the education specific funding for learning recovery that I mentioned has been held in reserves and is now being drawn down into the new financial year, and this is supporting the staff costs and the strategic programmes across the 22-23 financial year and academic year, and is included within the total budget for the resource. The budget variants, again, are outlined in Appendices A, at the bottom of Appendix A, and this reflects the movements to education budgets from the 1st of April through to the 15th of July. Now, there are quite a few of these as it sets out the new year budget from April. It covers some of the following key areas: transfers from reserves to meet our expenditure commitments, and this includes our programmes including PEF, GIRFEC, their new NQTs, ICT and learning recovery. Transfers to education for funded items, and again this includes things like our PPP inflation, fuel and from other resources in terms of activity that's going on there. The creation of budget to reflect a lot of the external income programmes that we've had, and these are brought in at the start of the year. Realignment of our budget to reflect how services are delivered and money is spent, including our PEF and our SEF programmes, and also the realignment within the resource to reflect the movement from our schools in terms of the devolved management scheme and also the EMA payment. So just standard activities there as we start the new year. So if I can refer again back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve that a break-even position in education resources revenue budget as detailed in Appendix A of the report be noted, and also the proposed environments be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Louise. Any questions? I've got Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Louise, for going through that as well, and good morning, everyone. On page 11, we've got reference, obviously, to SEF as the replacement for SAC, especially because we've got a number of new councillors and new committee members. Could councillors be provided with either a briefing on the move to SEF, the strategic equity funding from SAC, and the implications for the council, or could this maybe be brought to a future committee, please?
Yep, that's fine. We'll either bring a paper or a briefing will be provided. Thank you. I'll go on to David Watson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points. The issues with SPT when we return to school during the summer, will that have an impact on the education budget from the point of view of transport? And did it cost the council to pick up the pieces of the chaos of the buses not being available? And second question is, can we put a figure, are we in a position to put a figure on the likely impact the utility charges are going to cost the education budget with increases that are coming through? And again, what impact that would have on the budget? Thanks.
Thanks, David. I'll pass over to Tony for that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. I suppose in terms of the first one, there were increased pressures around transport costs anyway, just around inflationary pressures. So we don't quite know the full cost of that. There is a potential impact of what we've had to do over the past few weeks, and we're just trying to gain a sense of understanding, just trying to make sure that it's all been sorted first for our children and young people in the first instance. So there's definitely been, there is a potential impact, and we will report on that through our normal processes as well. So we're looking at that right now. And in terms of the costs around utilities, that is taken into consideration around our corporate finance team, and are looking at that at the moment again to try to give us some additional resourcing, I hope, because we will have a budget pressure. If you think we have 150 establishments, then inevitably, and there is a pressure around utilities as well. So that activity, that will be also reported, I believe, through Executive Committee as part of that issue, just around the wider impact. So we are seeing both those pressures, but ultimately we're trying to take some steps to let members know the pressures that we're having and the impact for us as well.
Yeah, David, you went back in.
No, thanks for that, Tony. I think it might be helpful if we could get a report to a future, and I accept what you're saying about maybe some of the transport stuff will come through in a future budget, but it would be good to know the impact that the utility charges are going to have on education specifically. I think it's important we get a breakdown of that and from resource to resource as well, but I think obviously, as you say, with the number of buildings that we've got in education, and that needs to be flagged up as a big issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually on the same line as Councillor Watson regarding the cost of the transport. I noticed in the last item we were over budget on transport by £500,000. There's £500,000 in these budgets being wired, and if I'm correct, that the school transport contracts are up approaching 20%. It suggests that there will be another £2.5 million required in the budgets. Where is this wired money coming from? What budgets are being cut to be able to wire extra funding into the transport? Because it seems strange that we're having to wire before we even children were back at school, and we didn't know at that time that there were going to be extra costs, according to SPT.
Tony.
Thanks. Councillor Larson, we would always look at, we've had a conversation on a fairly regular basis, we would always look at some of the way in which we have profile of spend. There are sometimes budgets that allow us to move money across, but we look at the totality of the budget and trying to make sure that we can align, and what you'll have seen from Lee's, there's a break-even position. And we managed to do that simply by aligning some of the budgets around timing. We know there's additional pressures around transport, but that is certainly around probably inflationary costs and indeed additional support needs, our number of children that are gaining individual transport as well. So we do try to move that and try to work to a position. The difficulty is saying what specific budgets, because you look at the budget spend, we don't look at specific cuts. We look at the timing of the spend and what budgets are available in order to try to balance that. So it's difficult to say, oh, it's from that budget there, because we try not to make, we try not to apply, we're not applying a cut somewhere in order to do that. We try to focus on balancing the budget and meeting that through different areas. I don't know if you've got anything, Louise, as well.
Yeah, I would just add that obviously funding has been allowed for within the budget strategy as part of the 22-23 financial year. So there's already 1.4 million almost has been made available for transport for education. And we are looking with Lorraine and her team to the specific requirements of utilities, and that's including both our gas, electricity, solid fuel. So we are forecasting that just now based on trends. The difficulty is obviously the increasing price, but also going into the winter and the requirements around the increased ventilation. So the trends and what we've spent before has been significantly affected by that over last year. But that is underway just now, so we will be able to report that at a future meeting.
Okay. Can you press your mic again? I'll put you on.
I can understand, Tony, that what you're saying, but under item H here on page, I'm not sure which page it is, there's almost there's over £7 million worth of environments already in the first 2 months. Now, whereas as a percentage of the total education budget, it's maybe not significant. It is still a huge number to be firing this early, and to suggest that there is no delivery or programme change to allow that to happen, I'm struggling to comprehend. I think, is it page 3 of that item, Tony, I think? The budget environments. No page numbers on it. I'm going way up there. It's Appendix A, sorry, Appendix A.
Tony.
I suppose for us that environments are a normal part of the business, and again, Louise maybe talk you through some of the specifics of the environments. It's not, I don't think it's quite as straightforward as they're all going into transport. That's just a normal business about how we would vire and how we would look at the money, Louise.
Yeah, these reflect obviously a lot of things that have happened. As I had said, there has been quite a lot of activity in our budget and the creation from the start of the year. Really, it reflects movements reflecting the pay award that we've had, additional funding for the PPP inflation in terms of our payments to contractors here, so bringing in that money, and also, as you're rightly saying, movements into transport as well. So we will, if you want the specific details of all those budget environments, that's obviously available across that period, so I can provide that. Yeah, well, the environments are, both sides. It's obviously a net effect on the education's budget, so there'll be a positive and a minus there as well, so that'll be provided.
Okay, thanks. Mo.
Thank you, Chair. Morning. It's speaking about transport and planting again, and I noticed that there was overvariance. My question is that children with ASN in mainstreamed schools, Tony, the transport, I did email this to you as well, for children, for example, going to swimming lessons and other things, that's just now being paid by some schools by charities. So the thing is, if the charity funding has dried up, where would this funding be coming from? So it's not going to and from school, but it's from the school to swimming lessons and other places for ASN children.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Councillor Razak. Just to be clear, swimming lessons are provided for all of our, and are offered for most of our children through the Leisure Trust. That's one of the Scottish Government have given us some additional money for core funded activities. There's no charges, but something like swimming is an optional activity. It's not, but we're fortunate that many of our primary schools opt into it. So it's not just for children with additional support needs, it's for all of the children in all of our primaries. Normally, around P5 or P6. I'm in a working group with Scottish Swimming about this just now, and the reason for that is lots of children and young people can swim, but it's to try to look at the focus and its purpose. So for us, schools will use some of their own internal fundraising activities, and I do take the point around the pressures of fundraising activities, and we've very much got an eye on that with cost of the school day. But there are some school fund activities that will look at that, and again, schools will look at how they manage their devolved budget to prioritise school swimming if that's what they want to do. School swimming is not a compulsory activity, but we're lucky that the vast majority, over about 120 of our schools, undertake the swimming programme. So we continue to work with our schools to ensure that funding through the devolved budget and some of their own internal funding activities take place so that they're able to do it. It's two separate issues. It's not specifically related to children with additional support needs.
Mo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tony. Firstly, I do understand that there is an optional. I've just taken swimming for an example. It could be the children going to libraries, or it could have children going to different activities, especially with SN. The reason I'm asking about this is that, number one, I think swimming previously used to be higher up in ranking. I'm talking about a number of years ago, and it should be, from my personal opinion, a core subject because of the fact that it could save someone from drowning if they've not been taught how to swim. But my thirst of this is that the ASN classes tend to be more going to different trips more often than the mainstream classes, and if the funding's drying up for them elsewhere for that, and it's very difficult in the cost of living crisis just now to raise funds, then that could easily mean that all these trips are curtailed. So can we not have a look at this and have a look at a way of funding this? Because if it's not the case, then we could have ASN children being stuck in class only.
Thanks, Councillor Razak. I think school excursions are important, there is no doubt. And again, I think your point is well made around children with additional support needs benefiting from that. Schools do have a devolved budget. We will work with them during the course of this year about the kinds of activities they're able to undertake. But schools are good at using a variety of funding sources available to them. That might very well be the devolved budget. That might be external money that comes in through PEF, because you can use PEF as a targeted activity for some children. Specifically around excursion, for an example of that as well. I take the point. I'll move to swimming. I take the point as a PE teacher to trade. I absolutely agree with the notion of children and the importance of swimming. I think that what I'm saying is, from a national perspective, there are very few activities that are compulsory. Swimming is not one of them. It is a high priority for us. We have a tremendous relationship with the Leisure Trust. The Leisure Trust, for our children who will get a block of 12 lessons, what then happens is, for the non-swimmer, they're then given an additional free set of supported lessons at the local swimming pool, and then their family are given some passes as well. So there's a really comprehensive support package for our children that get swimming within South Lanarkshire. The thing I would say is we continue to encourage our schools to do this, and the national pilot is trying to give some direction on that as well. So I take the point around the excursions. I suppose it's like all of the budgets, we have to try to get the best out of them.
Thanks very much. I have nobody else requesting to speak just now, so I am going to ask the committee to agree the report. Okay, thanks very much. I'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is Education Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 21-22, which is pages 15 to 20. And I'll just let Louise take her seat. Lorraine, sorry, take her seat. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, committee. This is the first of 2 capital monitoring reports for the resource. Item 4 is the final capital budget monitoring report for financial year 21-22, and that starts on page 15 of your papers. And it's really just to advise committee of the outturn position at the end of last financial year. Section 3 of your report gives you the background and explains that by the end of the year we had a revised budget of just under £15.5 million. Section 5 details the financial implications and notes that against that total programme of £15.5 million, we had a final spend position of just under £14.4 million, so a difference of £1.1 million. Section 5.2 goes on to explain the main projects which are responsible for the underspend, and the majority of the underspend really is in relation to timing, and that's something maybe just to advise committee of in terms of new members. There's a lot more fluidity in terms of the capital spend because we can roll budget forward into the next financial year to allow those projects to finish. Section 5.3 notes then that any funding that we didn't utilise will carry forward, and I'll pick that up in the next report in terms of our New Year programme. Sections 5.4 and 5.5 detail some of the accounting transactions and adjustments that Louise mentioned in her paper, and that's in relation to taking any spend that we think is not capital and maybe should sit in the revenue account over to the revenue side, and conversely any revenue spend that should be capitalised. There's no operational impact in terms of any of the projects, it's just an accounting entry only. So to that end, you can see in section 5.6, I think it is, that we have total spend on an accounting basis of £14.580 million. I've got no other points to note, so if I can refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask that the Education Resources budget of £15.498 million and final spend for the year 21-22 of £14.376 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Sorry, just getting used to this system. Any questions? No, I don't have any requests, so I will ask the committee to agree the report. Thank you very much. So we'll head on to agenda item number 5, which is Education Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 2022 to 2023, which is pages 21 to 24. And I'll ask Lorraine again.
Thank you, Chair. So then moving on to the new financial year, agenda item 5 then looks at the position to the 15th of July for the resources capital budget, and that's our accounting period 4. So again, section 3 gives you the background and explains that the budget is based on the overall capital programme, which was approved by Executive Committee at its meeting on the 29th of June. Section 5 then again goes on to detail the financial implications, and section 5.1 notes the total capital programme for the year is £16.133 million at this point in time. Since the approval of the budget back in February, we did have some adjustments identified by the resource, and they've been approved by committee, and that takes us to the budget of the 16.133. Section 5.3 notes then the position at the 15th of July. Anticipated spend to that date was £2.666 million, and actual spend incurred to that point was £2.606 million, so a very small underspend of £60,000, again just reflecting the timing of payments. I've got nothing to highlight to committee at the moment, so I'd be looking to refer you back to the recommendation in section 2, that the Education Resources budget of £16.133 million and that spend to the 15th of July of £2.606 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lorraine. Councillor Loudon.
Hi, sorry everyone, seems to be quite a delay this morning. Thanks for that, Lorraine. It's a brief question about 7.2 on page 22. I know we've had reports in the past about issues around supply chain. I just wondered if we could have an update on whether there's issues at the moment obtaining specific building materials as we've seen previously through this committee and other committees, or are we still talking about more general supply chain issues? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Just in terms of where we are in terms of section 7.2, it's really just to highlight to committee that there is still the risk there in terms of specific areas, and just generally across the piece we are looking to manage any particular material shortages. I think Lynn's got some detail in terms of the individual projects within the resource, but I think it's appropriate for us to highlight to committee that that is still a risk. Thank you.
Yeah, probably just to add, there are still issues with things like, steel and wood, etc. It's more to do with time delays, but there are a few issues with things that we can't get, and it's mostly around electronics. So Housing and Tech Resources colleagues are telling me things that involve electronics, like heat pumps, boiler systems, that kind of thing. So they're finding it difficult at the moment to get aspects of that, but they will continue to keep working on that and see what they can do. Prices for some things continue to remain high, but we were at Larkhall Academy a few weeks ago because there was some work's been done there, and they were talking about how just a simple bag of cement was 6 times the price last year. It's come back down, and the prices are more steady, but for some prices remain to be up, sometimes 10% more than what they were a few years ago. So we manage both the timing of that and the cost of that through the regular monitoring that we do between education and housing and tech.
Thanks very much. I don't have any further questions on that paper, so can I ask the committee to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the workforce monitoring, April to June 2022, pages 25 to 32, and I'll ask Eileen McPeak to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standard workforce monitoring report for education resources covering the period April to June 2022. So section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics for committee, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the absence rate for the resource for June was 3.7% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.3%. And this is decreased compared to the previous month. And if we compare it to the same period last year, there's a slight increase. Just by way of context, the overall current position for council-wide absence is 4.3%, and 1.07% of that relates to COVID absence. So taking all of that into account, the projected annual average figure for the resource is 4.9%, compared to a council-wide figure of 6.1%. So section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2 of your report, and the main points are that during the period there were 427 occupational health referrals, there were 2 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances or dignity at work issues raised, there was 258 accidents or incidents recorded during the period, and there was 56 leavers, and 52% of them completed exit interviews. Details of vacant posts during the period are in Appendix 2A, and there was 187 posts became vacant. 179 of them will be filled. 1 post was filled on a temp basis. 5 posts were ended due to a fixed-term contract, and 2 were held pending a review of the service. So I would refer committee back to section 2 and ask that the workforce monitoring information for education resources for the period April to June 2022 be noted. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll invite any questions. Don't seem to have any. So I will ask the committee to agree the report. Agreed. Thank you very much. I will go on to agenda item number 7, which is Education Resource Plan Q4 Progress Report, which is pages 33 to 66, and I'll invite Des to speak to that.
Good morning, everyone. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the Education Resource Plan Q4 Progress Report for the period 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. And bearing in mind the school year goes on until the end of June, so progress should be seen in this context. As members will know, this progress report is on the measures and actions within the Education Resources Plan. And it reflects both the aspirations of the council plan and the community plan in what we generally call the golden thread. So there's a golden link there, and that is shown on Appendix 1. But of course, over the last academic year, our schools and services were just returning from the impact of COVID, as referenced in para 3.3, in what we generally call our learning and recovery and renewal phase, and that's important at that particular time in this report. But as you would expect me to say, things never stand still in education. They never stop. And the ability of our schools and services to be agile and adapt to the ever-changing situation that they faced was the name of the game. And interestingly, some measures naturally over that period were put on pause by the Scottish Government. At Appendix 2, on page 43, we provide an update on all of the actions and measures in the Education Resources Plan Progress Report. And in paragraph 5, we provide an update on the progress at Q4. This report follows the Council's performance management system known as Improve and uses a colour-coded format to show the status of each measure. Now, I used to say that we followed a traffic light system, but we have added the colour blue in. And that gives you a context that blue is where something is completed and green is where we're on progress to achieve that. And that's important in the Education Resources Plan because, as I say, our year goes on to end of June. In paragraph 5.2, we show the overall summary as at 31st of March. And I'm certainly pleased to say that we have no red measures. And Appendix 3 on page 65 shows the progress that we made from Q2 to Q4. In paragraph 5.3, we highlight a number of key achievements for 2020-21 under each of the Council Plan priorities. And these are in the report, and you can see again the percentage of pupils entering positive destinations, care experienced young people getting modern apprenticeship posts, the awards of our youngsters in academic achievements. Of course, it was an assessment year. The progress made, as we've heard earlier on this morning, in terms of early years, and so on and so forth, and not forgetting the one where young people have been involved in sustainability and climate change through the COP26. And of course, there's references in this report as well to the support in terms of COVID for families and Chromebook advices. So quite a comprehensive report, Chair. So the committee is asked to note the following recommendations. They are quite long. That the Education Resources Plan Q4 Progress Report for 2021-22 as summarised in paragraph 5.2 and attached as Appendix 2 of this report be noted. That the key achievements made by the resource to date as detailed in para 5.3 of this report also be noted. And that the areas for improvement and associated management actions as detailed in paragraph 5.4 of this report again be noted. And finally, that the additional scrutiny of changes in the RAG status between Q2 and Q4, as summarised in paragraph 5.5 and detailed at Appendix 3 of this report, be noted also. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Des. I have Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to welcome the achievements in 5.3, including an increase in positive destination rates and particularly support for care experienced young people who often really need it. It's a credit to our young people and our teachers and school staff, and I particularly note an award for Larkhill Academy for excellence in professional learning. But in July, there was another social media push to get young people to register their interest for the Youth Council. What was the response to this, and are there a good number of young people currently engaged, and has there been more people getting engaged recently in it?
Thank you for your question. Tony? Sorry, is it?
Anne's going to...
Sorry. Thanks, Anne.
Okay. Thank you for the question. The South Lanarkshire Youth Council has been recruiting, you're right. We have a core of 15 members in the Youth Council, and that includes the 9 members of the Scottish Youth Parliament as well, from right across South Lanarkshire. Last night there was an area meeting, the first of the area meetings with interested young people in the East Kilbride area, and we were pleased that 14 young people attended that event. So we are pressing with recruitment in other areas, and we're seeing increasing interest that we're pleased about. And maybe just for your information, in terms of some of the activity they're undertaking, the Youth Council are currently supporting the development of mental health and wellbeing initiatives. So they're supporting our psychological service and doing a scoping exercise around that. And housing and technical resources are exploring the possibility of a youth housing forum with them as well. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks very much, Anne. I'll bring in Susan.
Thanks, Chair. Page 60, so South Lanarkshire Youth Strategy. See, it was launched in, let me see, and was ratified. It was launched in, sorry, I'm losing the plot here. Launch date been reset to after the elections in May. I was just wanting to ask, when will the youth strategy then be launched? Since we are after the elections now in May, any update on that?
Okay. No, I don't have a date just now. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. No. Okay. No, I was just going to say I didn't have information, so if you do,
Yeah, I can
then on you
update
go.
it. So the consultation process has been
Put
completed.
your mic on, sorry.
The consultation process itself has been completed. There was a delay due to COVID, like everything else. The document has been drafted and it's just gone through the PR process. I'm meeting with Frank Thompson today to go through the finer details, and then we're looking to bring it forward and publish it as well as possible.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Councillor Frame, please.
Hi there. Just a point about the Youth Parliament, the MSYP. I just think, I know what you're saying is they've been promoting that and trying encouraging people and everything else. Personally, my son is a MSYP and he went out his way and done all his campaigning and everything else. But since then, there's still nothing happening in the schools. So what has been done to ensure that the schools are making sure that these people are known to, like the first years have just started and there's been nothing mentioned to the first years that there's an MSYP member in the schools. So the young people are getting quite deflated because they've done a lot of hard work. So they want some recognition for that. Thank you.
And it is the case that the schools, our schools, South Lanarkshire schools in particular, are actively involved, you know, in the election process, and it's always a highly successful process in terms of involvement of the schools as well. I mean, your son's experience is regrettable, but I can certainly have a word with Frank just to find out what kind of activities going on underneath, just to keep that interest afloat. But I think earlier, you know, the launch of the youth strategy, I think will also help that too. So there are various events, aren't there, throughout the year that can help to boost interest. So I'll certainly chat to Frank about that. Thanks for your comment.
Yeah, just on that, just on the youth strategy, that's one of the key aspects of the youth strategy, to increase participation in the youth democracy system. And we spoke with Frank about a potential offer of hosting a meeting of the Scottish Youth Parliament to try and increase participation, particularly in South Lanarkshire Council.
Thanks very much. You went back in, Councillor Frame.
It's just the kids coming up into first year obviously were too young to vote. So what I'm saying is there's nothing for these first years to be, they've not been told, they've been in school now for 4 or 5 weeks, and there's no first years been told about or explained what it is or what it's about. So I think we need to be promoting that more in the schools. But I know what you're saying, that we're going to get more involved with this, but we need to start off at the basis. If people don't even understand or know what's going on, these kids have come up from primary and they're not aware of anything. So we have to start just now and making them more aware.
Thanks very much. I know that in the past we've had lots of great MSYPs and they've been really proactive in what they're doing. But if that's not what the experience you're finding is, Gavin and Anne have said that it is it's part of the strategy. But I do know in the past we've had, as councillors, we've had lots of interaction with MSYPs who have been there, and obviously there's been an election and our election and stuff like that as well. But it would be really good to get more interaction with the MSYPs, because they do a great job, and usually you find that they're really enthusiastic and they go on to do really great things as well. So I don't know, Tony, do you want in?
Thanks, Councillor. I think to make an important point as well, I suppose it's probably from a secondary perspective, there's maybe a timing issue about them. I think you're right to trying to get them as early as possible. I think the second thing as well is we want to try and encourage those young people themselves to be involved in their pupil councils and have student voice within their school, because then they can then work very closely with the MYSP. And the reason for that then allows them a connection between both the school and democracy beyond school life as well. I think there's a timing about when you pick the most appropriate time. When you think about first years coming in, they're overwhelmed with lots of information. So what you don't want to do is let that wash over their head, because it is such an important thing. So when you're getting some degree of discussion around pupil voice, I think it's at that point in which you would try to engage. But we'll certainly take that forward as well. I do think it's important.
Thank you very much. Eileen?
Okay.
Don't touch it.
Trust me. I think you've said some of the things I was going to say. I have a friend whose son has just, or grandson, should I say, has just started Carluke High School as it is. And he is still at this minute in time trying to negotiate the school. Never mind negotiate, you know, big things. And so I would say that if we come back here and say December, if the issues that were raised had still not been addressed, then I would be concerned. But at the minute, and I know firsthand when I speak to him, he's just like you said, no overwhelmed because he thinks it's much better than primary school. But he told me the other day he'd get lost. I don't know what he was doing, but he'd get lost. So I would say that if we did not have this, you know, if we were getting still the same information, say in December, then I would say, yeah, we've got a problem. I would agree with Lindsay that we've had some wonderful, good young parliamentarians, because we've met them in various, everybody probably has that's been a councillor before, and they were a credit to South Lanarkshire, to themselves, their families, etc. So that's that part. But the other part I wanted to say is last week Catherine McClimate and Lindsay and I and Gavin, as it is, were invited to and went to a celebration of young people and what they've been doing throughout the summer and various things. And I want to put in record, I have written a letter to you to thank everybody. It was a fantastic evening, and the achievements of young people who might not have actually got a chance to do some of the things that they did, and the fact that they could come up and speak about it. And then one young mother came up and said that she'd been given great confidence and her two girls had enjoyed it and all the various things, and it really, really lifted your spirits and your heart. And I know you started, Lindsay, by saying this was a consensual committee, and I think that should be the case for education. In the main, politics shouldn't come into it. We all want the best for our young people. But that was a tremendous evening, and as I say, I've written a letter and I hope it'll get passed out to all the various people, because the work that was undertaken was second to none and exemplary. Everybody was, you'll agree, fantastic. And on the first point, as I say, I think come December, if we're still sitting saying the same things, we've got a problem. But at the minute, with their huge big rucksacks and their jackets that don't even fit sometimes, I think we've got to give them a wee bit of time to get settled in. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your words, Eileen, and it was a brilliant event. We really enjoyed it, and it was amazing to see. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that will be passed on from the committee as well. So I don't have any other questions that I can see. So can I get the committee to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, because it's nearly 11 o'clock, I'm actually going to take a short break for the interpreters, so as that they can have a little break too. So I would say be back here for 11:05. Okay, thanks.
We can just take
Can everybody have a wee seat, please?
my face is red on that camera.
Councillor Horsham. That's me getting my teacher bit in. Okay, thanks very much everyone for that. We'll move on to items for decision. So agenda item number 8, Education Resources Workforce Plan 2022 to 2025, which is pages 67 to 80, and I will invite Eileen McPeak. Thank you.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to update the committee on the Education Resources Workforce Plan for 2022-2025 and highlight the key strategic actions required in relation to workforce planning. So by way of background, back in 2016, the workforce strategy was reported to the Executive Committee, and following on from that, Resources developed workforce plans covering the period 2017 to 2022. So there's been recent activity to update these workforce plans in line with our workforce planning cycle, and all Resources have now produced plans covering the period 2022 to 2025. So Section 4 outlines the steps that were taken in terms of developing the workforce plan using the workforce planning toolkit. So there were 4 key planning stages in the process. So the first stage was about looking at the business strategy and undertaking some analysis in terms of internal and external drivers which inform the resource plan, and then looking at the numbers and the skills required to deliver the desired outcomes. Stage 2 was looking at the current relevant data and analysing that in terms of the current workforce profile and also observations and predictions around future resourcing requirements. Stage 3 looked at the first 2 stages and then looking at what the plan was trying to achieve alongside the available resources to achieve the plan. And then finally, the resource management team and the HR business manager worked to develop an action plan based on the key areas of the workforce where risks had been identified in relation to the ability to deliver business objectives. So Section 5 gives an overview of the workforce plan for education resources. A full copy of the plan is attached in Appendix 1 of the report. So just to highlight the key themes for the resource in terms of workforce planning, and they are education, recovery and reform, workforce supply challenges, which will be impacted by the reduction in class contact time and the subsequent requirement for more teachers. And this is a national issue, not specific to South Lanarkshire. For support in early years staff, the ability to recruit and retain employees in a competitive market. The demographic of the workforce in general and the impact that that will have on succession planning. And maintaining employee wellbeing and resilience. So the resource have identified key actions to address these challenges, and that is revised recruitment practices to attract and retain employees, plan for the implementation of the reduction of class contact time once the funding arrangements have been confirmed, assess the impact of the future vision for education in terms of funding and staffing, and review the allocation of recovery funding and rationalise the allocation. And all of this aligns in general with the common themes from the Resource Action Plan. And the common themes there are an increased demand and a reduced workforce pool. And again, this is a national issue, not specific to South Lanarkshire. The demographic challenges around increased turnover, employees retiring earlier than expected, and then the impact that then has on succession planning, and overall employee health and wellbeing. So section 6 highlights what the risk implications are, and just to highlight what they are. So there is a reduced workforce supply, and it is a risk to delivering the actions that have been identified, but this is reduced by adapting services to be delivered within the workforce that's available. There is a risk about the ability to maintain service requirements, given the time that it will take to train and develop employees to achieve the required skills mix, given the complexity of skills required across different roles. And then what we're seeing as well is competing recruitment drives across authorities, and that could mean a reduced staffing level in some areas. But once the arrangements for education reform, reduced class contact time and funding have been confirmed, then the associated risks will be reduced. So Section 7 outlines how the plan will be monitored. So the actions in the plan will be monitored through the resource management teams, and as arrangements on national initiatives emerge, and any significant changes will be reported through the corporate management team. So I've got no other issues to highlight in terms of the report, so I'm referring committee back to section 2 and asking that the content of the report be noted and that the Education Resources Workforce Plan as attached in Appendix 1 of the report be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Councillor Anderson to come in.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two questions. First, that's Tony to get out his red pen and go to page 75. And it is regarding the increased demand and reduced workforce pool. If you look who the lead officer is from HR and whatever manager that is, I'm surprised it came through to this stage from education. And the other one is on page 76. And we have the bit where it is saying, reduction in class contact time, increased teacher numbers approx. Do you know what the approximate is? Or has that just been missed out, or are you waiting on the funding? Or can you give us a rough estimate as to approximately how many extra teachers you do require? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Anderson. Your eagle eye, and we've shockingly found out that teachers aren't perfect at spelling, so thank you very much for that. Stuart, do you want in on that?
Thanks very much, Chair. First of all, thank you, Councillor. We will go back and somebody will get detention as a result of this. It may well be me. We'll take that on. But you ask a good point about the additional numbers around reduced class contact time. That's a big question for us as well. You would think it was a straightforward calculation that if we go from 22.5 hours to 21 hours contact time, that'd be 1.5 hours per teacher. We've got about 3,500 teachers. There are sums to be done that will come out in the order of 240 FTE. However, it will depend on the metric applied by Scottish Government and SNCT in terms of how that actually pans out in practice. What they may do is come back and say, well, there are a number of people who are teachers but who would not be counted in there because they wouldn't be teaching the maximum class contact time. So senior managers, for example, don't teach anywhere near the maximum class contact time. The other complicating factor in there is during the period of the last two sessions, we've had additional permanent funding allocated 64 FTE 2 years ago and last year, and for this current session, another 82 FTE. So the question for me is, will that 146 FTE, once the sums are done around how much extra we need to deliver the reduced class contact, will the starting point be, well, we've already given you an extra 146 and we'll only give you a handful on top of that to make up the difference? So there are some big questions in there. But we've done our sums. We've got a fair sense of what it will look like if we just go an hour and a half per teacher, what it will look like if we start to take out some of those promoted posts, and what the expectation may be. My understanding, this is still very much a live issue in a discussion with SNCT, the national organisation who will pull together the parties involved. So we wait with bated breath, because another element to this will be around recruitment. If we are looking for, say, 150 or 180 new teachers, I would rather know now. I would rather the budget was phased over a period of time so we can start to recruit on a year-by-year basis, rather than getting into a flat spin with everybody else nationally in recruiting, trying to do that in a single year for a straightforward big bang implementation, so to speak. So this is one of probably the most significant changes that's coming. It looks straightforward, doesn't it? A technical change going from 22.5 to 21 hours, massive implications across the piece. There's another wee bit in there around efficient timetabling and deployment of staff. So whatever the straightforward calculation is, we would need a bit of additionality and a bit of leeway in there as well. But I'll not get into the technicalities of that. You're welcome to contact me and I'll discuss some of that if you'd like. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions in this, and I should proceed by saying I know there's a lot in flux just now, and it's complicated because of all of the internal and external drivers that Eileen referred to, and all the complications that Stuart has just referred to. On page 73, first of all, under challenges, where we're talking about NQTs, it says there's a current oversupply of NQTs in the primary sector across some geographical locations. So as a result, the resource is unable to guarantee the offer of permanency to these applicants that we would usually deem appointable. And then on page 74, it says we're projecting modelling requirements based on anticipated SNCT advice relating to the implementation of the non-class contact time increase. So 2 questions on that. Does the oversupply of primary NQTs refer to geographical areas within the council? Is this quite specific, or are we talking on a wider basis within the council area? And this related to that, even if we can offer NQTs permanency after the probation year, will the council be looking at supporting and trying to retain them on a temporary basis to not only support them, but to meet some of the other pressures that we're facing? Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Loudon. Really important questions to ask right now. I know that having gone through the recruitment process, we've got a number of people who have not been successful in securing permanent appointment, who are disappointed, and understand that. We would always want to be able to give posts to anybody who applies for a post with us, who interviews well and receives a good score at interview. We simply don't have the posts available, or brackets the budget available to do that. I suppose the first bit around the oversupply of NQTs, and that's a national issue rather than a local issue. And that may well be overtaken in time with a reduction in class contact, because we are going to need, as I said a moment ago, a significant number of additional teachers, as will every local authority across Scotland. So there's a wee bit of work to be done around that. Specifically just now to ourselves, across the council, it's a bit of a movable feast, I have to say. What happens is the pattern of vacancies, the supply and demand, I suppose, can change and can change at the last minute through people having promotions elsewhere, or retirals at this time of year, or changes to work patterns. But by and large, what we find is oversupply is more of an issue in kind of Cambuslang, Rutherglen, in Hamilton and East Kilbride, and less of an issue in Clydesdale. And actually sometimes it's the reverse that we struggle there, so it's something we're mindful of. And it's not just in terms of the geography, we sometimes have issues around matching supply and demand around the denominational and non-denominational sectors as well. So it's something we're absolutely mindful of. In terms of the bit about supporting and retaining people who don't get posts, and I suppose the starting point is the number of NQTs we get is within our control to an extent. We make an application, but we will actually be given an allocation, and very often we're asked to take a few extras or a number of extras there. But our process does allow, so once we fill our permanent vacancies, councillors will be aware that we have a permanent area cover pool. That's currently sitting at 240 FTE, and in the secondary we have an additional allocation that goes into our secondary schools of around about 60 FTE. So that's 300 FTE of permanent posts that other authorities tend not to run. They tend to run a straightforward supply budget model. We try and bring people in, give them permanency, give them job security. It also means that they are in schools having the opportunity to learn and practice a craft and be part of the development activity. I have to say that comes at a cost, an average cost of about 56,000 to employ a teacher, so we're knocking on the door of £17 million there. This session, as I said, we brought in about 146 over the last 2 years permanent staff. What we've also been able to do is beyond that, we've used some of that recovery funding to put in another 46 FTE fixed term posts. So we are working hard to do the best we can by those who come through. And I still realise that that's scant comfort if you happen to be one of the people who doesn't have a permanent post, but I would suggest that we are working really hard to bring people in and to do the best that we can by them within the constraints that we've got. I suppose we'd always say that at no time were we in a position where everybody was able to be guaranteed a post that's just a straightforward fact in terms of where we've been, irrespective of COVID or the additionality or the models that we've got in place. But we continue to look at this. This may all change over the next couple of years as we introduce that reduction in class contact. It may well be that we're going back and making offers to people, and there will be additional posts there, and we may find ourselves going back to the days of struggling to recruit teachers. And I guess that's the difficulty in trying to anticipate what that model will look like, whether we're going to be looking for a top-up or whether we'll have a good number there. But we continue to keep an eye of it, and we do continue to try and work with individuals. The other bit is if anybody doesn't get a permanent post with us, if they accept a supply contract with us, it means they're still eligible to apply within the internal recruitment campaigns, and I think that's a really important point to make too. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart, for that comprehensive explanation. That's really useful. I have no further questions that I can see. So can I ask the committee to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. I'm moving on to items of noting. I'm going to propose that we don't ask each officer to speak to each item. I'm just going to ask if there's any questions. So I'm going to move on to item 9, which is Education Resource Plan 2022-23, which is pages 81 to 106. And I am going to ask if there's any questions. Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we do have a question on item 9. Would say I would be slightly disappointed if we rushed through the celebrating success item. It's always been a highlight of the Education Committee to give the recognition to the children and young people who and the schools establishments who are recognised in that. So that's maybe something to think about. I would propose that we hear that last report in full. Back on to item 9, however, this is on page 97 about the residential and outdoor learning activities. I'm pleased to see that there's reference in this expanded version of what has been presented to us before about taking into account costs of the school day, because some of our group have expressed concern about expectations on parents and carers in this area, although we do know that there has always been good individual practice from particular schools in this area. Question related to this, last session, especially in that period of time when schools were able to go back onto residential trips and get them booked again, and then before the end of term, schools were somewhat restricted in terms of what was available to book for them because of the pandemic restrictions ending. Availability being tight because everyone wanted to go at the same time, previous issues with insurance that had popped up during the pandemic, and some trips were shorter and so on. So do we expect this situation to be a bit better for schools this year, and are they going to have more choice and flexibility again when they're looking to book residential activities? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Loudon. A great question, and you couldn't have asked it at a better time. I think on a level of education resources, as I said earlier, there were restrictions in what we could and could not do. And I think none more so in the bureaucrat that I am, it was the impact on children and young people, because they missed their P7s, they missed the transition, and the same with secondary age pupils as well, and the residential experience. The timing is, from an education's point of view, we very much, and through the director, are supporting residential experiences or educational excursions and trips. But we have to do that within a context of what we're experiencing now, the cost of the school day. So I suppose what we're at is at the starting line again. We are seeing, as we saw probably from when we started again to open up the doors from Easter period, we saw that increase in that door being opened. What we also saw, as you quite rightly pointed out, was a change to the insurance. So the guidance that we've been putting out to school, and we're about to put guidance out again this week to schools, is to remind parents that the council's insurance will cover yourselves for accidents, etc., etc. So that's still in place, that doesn't change. But the insurance changes if there's a cancellation because of a COVID type or a pandemic type scenario. So we've been upfront around that prior to the summer holidays, trying to make sure that parents and our schools know that, and that's up front. But we're trying to also balance that out with actually a reflection on where have the trips gone over the last few years. And what I would say is be realistic. So most of them are trying to look at that through the prism of the cost of the school day. It might well be that it might not go for 5 days, they might go for 3 days. But let's look at it through the prism of the experience of the youngster. What are you offering? And come up with that menu. And I think also, Councillor, we also had some dialogue through Nick Lansdale, who's the professional expert for outdoor learning. And we engaged with some of the providers to try and say, right, OK, we know that it's a survival game for you in the business side, but let's get back to a realistic approach of around costing and flexibility. And I have to say, the vast majority of them were very flexible during that particular period. So we're at the start. I think you'll know yourself from your previous post about cost of the school day and the implications, and all the members have mentioned that this morning as well. So that has been taken account into all sorts of ways how we might fund it. Our parent councils have equally been asking the same question. When can we get the start blocks going again, and around some of the activities that they might want to start looking at, because they've been very good in the past about supporting events and activities, and it gives them a purpose also to do that. So watch this space. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Lambie.
There, thanks. So in agenda item number 9 strikes me as probably one of the most important documents on the agenda today. I was just wondering why it's only for noting and not for approval. This is obviously my first education committee meeting that I've attended, and I was kind of hoping to find an action plan to mitigate the downward spiral of our maths, reading and science on the PISA rankings. I was hoping I was going to find it in agenda item 9, but I couldn't see anything, and I'm just wondering why we're not able to interrogate this document and it's only for noting. Thanks.
Tony.
Thanks, Councillor Lambie. Probably a couple of things. As part of the council's process, the plans go through the executive committee, all of the plans at the one time for approval. I would be more than happy to have a discussion around attainment. The attainment within South Lanarkshire has been an improving picture. And for our children and young people, I believe that they get an excellent deal from our teachers. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We have a regular discussion and debate about the international evidence and what the PISA surveys say and its relationship to Scotland. The thing I would say is that from a South Lanarkshire perspective, our children continue to, our attainment levels do improve. That is around literacy and numeracy. So in literacy, read, write, listen and talk. And that's around our Curriculum for Excellence data will show us that. Obviously, we've had the past couple of years and we can't underestimate the significance of that. but we do see a trend of our young people and our schools really focused on attainment as well. So we're more than happy to engage around the very specific strategies that we would look at for literacy and indeed numeracy, or for the SQA results as well. More than happy to have an extensive dialogue around the attainment of our schools, and we do bring papers that look at the very specific elements of whether it be SQA or indeed in a couple of committees' time we will get the opportunity to discuss our Curriculum for Excellence data as well, so we would look forward to those levels of discussion. Go back to my original thing around your question about approval versus this committee paper being noted. That's done through the corporate process.
Thanks very much. Councillor Donnelly.
Meetings that I attended, and I think Des indicated how to get round it, and that was reducing the actual days which the kids still got away with residential care, but it reduced the cost to families. So I think that's something to be mindful about when we're talking to parent councils, because it is very beneficial to the kids. But I think do have to be mindful of the cost that we're asking parents to endure. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks very much, Mary. I will have no further questioners, so I'm going to ask the committee to agree that report. I'll move on to the Youth Employability and Work-Based Learning, pages 107 to 120. Is there any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. My question in item 10 is on page 114. This is on the replacement shared prosperity funding, aka the levelling up money, to replace European structural funding, which has been funding posts in this area before. I can see that from the report there's applications pending. I just wondered if there's any update on when we can expect to hear the outcome from these grant applications. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Loudon. We don't have the specific detail because obviously we're just one part of that bidding process for us. So it will come through, I believe it's going to come through towards the Executive Committee, then into our specific committees themselves. Just for reassurance, of course, we still have that funding in place at the moment and we're able to use that funding just now.
Thanks. Alec.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions, and one of them's not about the standards of education. That's been well asked. Regarding the foundation apprenticeships, graduate work placement, how is this operating in the rural area? Is it blended? Is it face-to-face? How do pupils manage to access that? Because I'm well aware you can't even on a good day get from where I stay to Hamilton by 9 o'clock in the morning by public transport. And secondly, on positive school leaver destinations in table 6, in the last 3 years our performance has dropped below the national average. So why has that happened and what are we doing to rectify that?
Thanks, Alec. Stuart.
Thanks, Councillor Allison. I'm just looking at table 6. We dipped below slightly this year, but the last 2 years we were 94.8. Scotland was 93.3. 2018-19 we were 95.7. They were 95.0.
Sorry, in table 6 I've got 92.4, which is below Scottish average in 13-14, and it's below it in 12-13. Oh, sorry, I'm reading it upside down. My apologies. My excuse is the education system I went through.
I think the detention might be for you, Alec.
One of the things that I am aware of, though,
so congratulations on the improvement.
we'll take that, but I'll not hide behind the fact that we're 96.8, we're slightly above that. You know, looking ahead, there's been some significant challenges, and somewhat is around timing. But we're never complacent about this. We see this as a really important agenda, particularly for our most vulnerable young people and care experienced. And in the period since the Q4 report, there's been significant additional activity. One of the issues we're always up against is unknowns. So people who we simply don't know where they are currently, and we've taken some really strong approaches around that, including going and knocking on doors. I think there's a reference in here to try and, this is not just about fixing the statistics, this is about trying to find out what's happening with young people and then re-engaging with those who are struggling for one reason or the other. And I know that the last couple of years has been tough for everyone, but it's had a particularly, I suppose, doubling down of that impact on young people and families in less affluent circumstances. So that's something we'll look to address. You'd also asked about the provision of some of those programmes and how we carry that out. One of the things that we're very much aware of are the transport issues and issues affecting particularly Clydesdale. So we have hub-based models. So there is a combination of blended learning approaches, but also we have hub-based models for some of that practical activity so that people are not having to travel out into Hamilton or into the Glasgow College Consortia, that they're getting something much more local and much more appropriate in terms of the journey time. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll read the papers clearer the next time.
Do your homework. Elise.
It's just a quick question. It's to do with the plan. It's for your work placements for when they're going out on their placements. And I see here like we've got social care down as one of them. Now, as a worker in a care home, we've never been asked to take any kids from schools into care homes as work placements. So I'm thinking that we need to get that more notified to most schools that there is an option there, because just now there is obviously a lack of social care workers and care home workers, and maybe that's something we could be using to promote this in another way as well. Thank you.
One of the things that we're aware of this last couple of years has been the real challenges, care homes being a good example, around restrictions on the numbers of people able to come in. And we'll work with the youth employability team in all of those areas to try and reintroduce and step up and upscale some of those activities. And I know that not just care homes, but across the council, the council resources have been excellent in supporting some of that additional activity and so on. And that notion of growing your own is not new to us. And I think it's a great idea, and it's something that we were very successful with through, for example, the expansion of early years. And that's something we'll maybe come back to, and I'll pass on to the youth employability team.
I was just going to come in and say I'm presenting a very similar report for Social Work Resources Committee tomorrow in terms of their workforce plan, and part of that is very much on the grow your own and about how you make social care more attractive in terms of a career, and part of that is about promoting our own modern apprenticeship programme that's already there, but actually about starting younger and even getting into schools and doing school placements. So it is something that certainly social work resources are already taking into consideration, and will also be tying into what's on offer through the education route as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Eileen Logan.
Thank you. Actually, that was one part you've just answered something that I was going to ask there, just in your last remarks. So that's fine, but I just want to say that, and I'm assuming as well with private enterprise, that it's dependent also on the owners of the establishments, if they would choose to have people in their workforce or younger people, because there'd be insurances and there'd be all sorts of different things, and obviously, you know, safeguards for the both sides, to be honest. So that would be something else that would not necessarily, I'm not saying a huge barrier, but it'd be something that would need to be cognizant of, that, you know, it's not just as easy as saying, just come in. There'll be a whole lot of different things here. But I just wanted to say again, I know that the work that goes on behind the scenes, just through something else I used to do in the council, used to meet all the teams and the various things. And for years, and I'm glad it's now sort of panning out, for 20 odd years, I have said repeatedly that you didn't need to have a university degree to be a plumber or a joiner or and that's how it was. That's how it was becoming. That if you were an absolute failure and your families were uptight because their children weren't getting to the uni. But everybody's no university or would like to go to a university, and it doesn't belittle any of their skills. The best joiners or plumbers or whoever it happens to be are people sometimes that can work with their hands. So I am so pleased. I haven't been in education the last 5 years, but so pleased that it's came such a long journey, and that everybody now, if they choose, can get a fair shake at what they want to do. And again, looking for even, it doesn't even need to be vulnerable children. You can have 2 children in a household, and one wants to do this, and the other one, their parents despair because they just say they don't like school, and that would be it. But if you find them a niche, they're happy and they'll work and away they go. And I think it's fantastic. And I'm coming back to what we had last week. Just to encourage and give a wee bit of encouragement's a wonderful thing. And I am so pleased that everybody from government right down has taken on board about apprenticeships and the various different stuff, because it does help, because it keeps the children even in the schools. And on the blended learning, I don't know about here, but I know that in North Lanarkshire, because I know somebody that's doing it, they are getting 2 days to do it online and 1 day to go somewhere else. So that is probably all coming in. That would be through, I think it's the college up in Motherwell. Is that North Lanarkshire College or whatever it's called? Aye. But no, I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. I don't have any other questions, so I'll get the committee to agree the report. Early learning childcare, agenda item number 11, update pages 121 to 130. Any questions? Nope, I'll get the committee to agree the report. Agenda item number 12, independent review of qualifications and assessments in Scotland, school participation, pages 113 to 134. Have we got any questions? Nope, I will get the committee to agree. Agreed. Thank you. Summer holiday provision 2022, the interim update report. Another technical issue, I was doing so well. Summer holiday provision 2022 interim update report, pages 135 to 142. Is there any questions? Councillor Allison.
I think I've read it right this time. Can I just ask, the funding from Scottish Government has been reduced by 30%. Are we looking to make that up, or are we cutting the programme and targeting it instead?
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, we've added our council contribution into that pot and continued on with the activities that we have run, still encouraging as many of our third sector organisations to come and join us in the delivery. So we have seen a slightly smaller number of third sector participants come through this year, but we've maintained the 14 hubs that we ran in partnership with Terminal 1 and Hippie and Mac and Trust, etc. So we've tried to maintain it as best we can. We also provided some funding to, you can see in the report, to South Lanarkshire Leisure, because their funding was also reduced as well. We did use some of the money last year to kind of pump prime the system and spent some of that on resources, so that we had climbing walls and all sorts of different activities that we would have all those resources to be used by South Lanarkshire, by Leisure and by the third sector as well. So we didn't need as much of that this year because we'd done it last year. So that helped kind of compensate for the reduction in budget.
Thanks very much, Lynn. I was lucky enough to go to some of the summer hubs during the summer, and it was they were absolutely brilliant, and it looked like the kids were all having great fun. So hope it continues. Phone number 14 is Celebrating Success, which is page 143 to 146. Is there any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my hand up hadn't registered here. It was a question that I'd had for the previous item, but it was just a small point, so I will pick that up later with officers. But since I have been selected at the moment by the wonders of technology, I would obviously like to welcome the contents of the report. I'm not going to pick out individual achievements from here because there are some fantastic good news stories which are across the piece here in many different geographical areas. So I'll just say that, and I'll pick up the point about the previous item, perhaps with the clerks as well, because my machine just wasn't responding at that point. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, it's a similar point, thanks Chair, a similar point to Councillor Loudon. I think it would be good to get a quick summary of this report so we can properly note the success of our schools and our young people.
Thank you very much for your comments. I will move on to agenda item number 15. Oh, can I ask to note the previous report? Thank you. Thank you very much. I will move on to agenda item number 15, which is any urgent business, which I've had none intimated. And I will thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.